Africa, a land of thunderous footsteps, ancient pathways, and landscapes shaped by time, drought, storms, and survival. But today, something new is shaping this wilderness, something silent, something floating far above the clouds. Satellites, machines in orbit, watching, measuring, recording every shift in the land below. Just imagine I told you that satellites orbiting Earth right now are watching elephants shake up the African wilderness and changing the landscape faster than we ever imagined. Stick around, hit subscribe, because this story from space down to the savanna floor is wild in every sense. The greater Kruger region in South Africa is a vast, interconnected landscape of forests, savannas, and grasslands that includes Kruger National Park and several private and community nature reserves near the park. It's a haven of biodiversity that harbors the big five game animals, along with rare and endangered wildlife, such as pangolins, cheetahs, and ground hornbills. It's also a dynamic region, with fast-growing towns to the west, extensive fuelwood and timber harvesting, a thriving tourism industry, widespread agriculture, and pockets of mining. Given the potential for conflict between people and wildlife, it has also become a focal point of rewilding, an effort involving the park and several nearby nature reserves to restore wildlife habitat and more natural migration patterns by removing fences, returning pasture and farmland to nature, and rethinking the distribution of artificial watering holes. From the 1,960 seconds through the 1,990 seconds, many of the reserves were fenced, preventing animals from moving freely between them and the national park. Starting in the 1,990 seconds, reserves began removing fences, creating a rare opportunity for scientists to study how large-scale changes, such as rapid increases in elephant populations, might affect vegetation and ecosystems. Scientists from Jody Vogler's lab at Colorado State University, for instance, are leading an ongoing NASA-funded project aimed at assessing rewilding-driven changes and helping wildlife managers and policymakers use remote sensing to support decision-making in the region. As part of the effort, the researchers published a draft study in summer 2025 that detailed an innovative technique for fusing several types of satellite data to assess changes in the region's woody vegetation across 3 dimensions. They're translating the surface data into metrics that are relevant to how land managers make decisions and monitor their landscape, said David Bunn, a professor of forest resources management at the University of British Columbia. What managers need to know is, what is the structural change in the vegetation, and how does that influence habitat there? One trend that stood out in time series maps of the region was the impact of rewilding on woody vegetation in Thornybush, a private nature reserve west of Kruger National Park. In 2017, managers removed fences along the eastern side of the reserve, reconnecting more than 140 square kilometers, 54 square miles of land with adjacent nature reserves and the national park. From 2017 to 2019, the elephant population in Thornybush surged from 55 to 770, according to Bunn. The change coincided with a sharp reduction in vegetation height and density associated with elephant browsing. High densities of elephants can limit woody growth by uprooting small trees, stripping bark from larger trees, and pushing trees over to reach leaves and bark while browsing, Bunn explained. This counteracts the natural process of bush thickening, which occurs as trees and shrubs fill in open areas over time that were previously grasslands or farmland. The stage, a land of giants and change. This is the story of Kruger National Park and its surrounding private reserves, a vast African wilderness where savannas, forests, and grasslands meet. For decades, from the 1,960 seconds through the 1,990 seconds, many of these reserves were fenced off. Animals couldn't roam freely between them, but people began to rethink that. Conservationists saw a chance. What if we reconnect these lands? Let nature flow again. Starting in the 1,990 seconds, fences began coming down. Reserves unlocked. Land reopened. Corridors between habitats reformed. Dollars. This is rewilding. Giving animals back their freedom. Giving ecosystems a shot at healing. Very 10. Eyes in the sky satellites to the rescue. Here's where it gets sci-fi. Scientists, with support from NASA, turned to space to track what's happening on the ground. They used a mix of satellite data. The Getty instrument on the International Space Station, which uses LiDAR to measure forest and tree cover structure in 3D height, density, structure. Optical data from satellites, such as Landsat. Radar data from satellites, like the Japanese ALOS-1 and ALOS-2000 pulsar. This radar can peer through clouds and capture woody vegetation structure. By combining data from all these sources, scientists can build a 3D X-ray of the landscape, capturing tree height, density, and other structural changes over time. This is powerful, because you don't just see whether there are trees, you see how healthy, tall, or dense the forest is. H9s. The wild experiment fences come down. Elephants move in. On one of those private reserves, Thornybush Nature Reserve, the fence came down in 2017. Over 140 square kilometers of land suddenly reopened to neighboring reserves and the park. Almost immediately, something extraordinary happened. Between 2017 and 2019, the elephant population in Thornybush exploded from just 55 elephants to roughly 770. 770. Yes, you heard right. 55 SEVENSEVENZERO. As the elephants poured in, their presence began to reshape the land. Ad show. Nature's pushback trees under pressure. Scientists looked at satellite data from 2017 to 2021. What they saw was wild. In many areas of Thornybush, tree canopy cover dropped sometimes by more than 20%. Why? Because elephants don't just walk, they browse. They uproot small trees. They strip bark from bigger ones. They push over trees to reach leaves. They're like nature's wrecking crew, except they also plant seeds, fertilize the soil, open pathways for grasses. It's chaotic, but part of the balance. In contrast, in fenced-off zones of the reserve, areas that remained closed off, tree cover increased green on the map. There's a pattern. Where elephants roamed free, the forest thinned. Where land stayed fenced, the forest thickened. When for stat, why it matters, ecosystem, food, future. This isn't just about less trees. It's about the shape of the wild. Tree structure, how tall trees grow, how dense the canopy is, defines the kind of habitat creatures get. It changes shade, undergrowth, grasslands, the safety or shelter for smaller animals. It affects fire risk. It affects water retention. It affects the entire chain of life. By using this satellite fusion method, land managers now have a tool, a way to monitor in near real time how wildlife movements shape or reshape their landscapes. It helps them make decisions, where to recreate corridors, when to limit population, when to let nature roam. To quote a scientist involved, they're translating surface data into metrics that are relevant to how land managers make decisions. Putting satellite eyes in the sky gives humans a chance to understand and maybe even predict how Earth's wild places evolve. When Team 4, the elephant boom shook the savanna hard. It's wild to think, in just a couple of years, releasing fences and letting elephants roam did not just grow the elephant population, it remodeled the forest. Trees that might have stood for decades got eaten, stripped, knocked down. In places that stayed closed, the forest quietly thickened. The difference? Freedom, movement, elephants doing what elephants do. It's like giving a sculptor a forest-sized block of marble and letting elephants carve it, brutally beautiful. It's past. What's next? The big questions. Can we strike a balance between wildlife freedom and forest preservation? How many elephants is too many for a given reserve before the land tilts too far toward open savanna rather than woodland? Will other species, smaller mammals, birds, Insects benefit or suffer from these shifts in tree cover and habitat structure? Can this satellite fusion method be used elsewhere, across Africa, Asia, even our own ecosystems? Science is just beginning to answer these. That's to have God too. Final thought: nature, tech, and the unexpected. Who would have guessed? Satellites orbiting 400 kilometers above Earth, now watching elephants stampede, uproot trees, rewriting the map of the African wild. It's a cosmic meets savannah kind of story. Makes you wonder what else is up there. Watching Earth change. What other wild surprises await? Responsory. This isn't the end, it's just round one. Next up, we'll explore how these changes ripple down to smaller animals, grass species, even water cycles. Could removing fences set off a chain reaction across the whole ecosystem? If you want to see how Earth evolves under the watchful eyes of satellites and the roaming feet of elephants, subscribe now and don't miss the next update. Because the wild is rewriting itself, and we've got front row seats.